Yes, thank you for the question. It is without a doubt any heritage day or any day that is considered worthy of being a public holiday is definitely a day worth its salt given our history, coming out of apartheid, even earlier going back to colonization. It's definitely an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to remember, an opportunity to pay homage, respect to those that contributed to our narrative today. So those are definitely both days, June 16 and the Sharpeville Massacre, Human Rights Day. Those are definitely days that it's non-negotiable. We need to commemorate. But for me, commemorating is an exercise of being responsible with the archive, correcting the narrative, because we find a lot of distortion, a lot of political parties claiming storylines which don't belong to them. So definitely June 16 is actually one of the, we say it's Youth Day, but that's wrong. The UN has now declared the month of June as basically Youth Month. And it's a time in our history where we were beginning to be seen by the world for the violence that the apartheid regime was imposing upon the majority of the oppressed. But we've been oppressed way before that. So I always think about it as it was a climax. June 16, if anything, should be seen as a climax of so much that was brewing before that. And so it's not even a question that it should be commemorated. Its relevance remains and will always be there. Oh, certainly. I think that the question of youth is really the question of the nation in its bulk. We are in a population which plus minus has, I think we're sitting at about 70 something percent of the population is youth, is younger than the age of 18 or 21. And so the youth problem is the national problem. The unemployment rate is nothing but a ticking time bomb, because it's only a matter of time before we're going to see how the solution of prisons, is really lazy thinking. When these youth who are unemployed resort to stealing, resort to shady deals, resort to selling their own souls, to doing practices just to get bread, you can't always say, the legal system, the prison system is a solution. You need to start checking what you mean by rehabilitation centers, because prisons don't rehabilitate anybody, not just the youth. Anyone that goes through that system comes out actually a graduate of the criminal underworld. So for me, the question of youth is also the question of our education institutions. If you think about how every year these institutions have to contest spaces, UJ will tell you we only have 90,000 slots, and we have something like over 200,000 applications. And so, what happens to those that, the 110 that were rejected, and no solution is given to that, right? And so this kind of rhetoric post 94 really feeds to the ANC has only built 2 universities after 94. And if you compare those 2 universities, Sol Plaatje University and Mpumalanga, it's a disgrace. You can't even compare them with a UCT, a Rhodes, a Rao, a Stellenbosch. And you're like, but you've been in power. Yet the universities that you inherited still are the ones that are the elite, are the ones that your students want to go to, It speaks volumes to then where have you been investing your funding? These moments of fees must fall is nothing else but a continuation of the 1976 moment, where they were raising the same issues of educational crisis, okay, the bankruptcy of the agenda of education. It's the same narrative, there's nothing new. So the unemployment rate really speaks to a country that is failing to be imaginative in a fourth industrial revolution age. And it's interesting that if technology is the future, you are then going to have a problem because the same technology is still going to be granting more and more of these youth out of employment because that work is now being done by artificial intelligence, by robots, so you're gonna have, we are actually warming up to a serious civil war, which is going to be led by the high unemployment rate of the youth. Okay, that's a heavyweight question. First and foremost, right from the get-go, the very notion that our education system is divided into primary, secondary, and then tertiary, that in itself is a colonial model of education. We are Africans, we are claiming to be African, yet everything in terms of structures are European, are Western. And so we need to have a conversation that is long overdue. We need to start having dialogues which are going to be uncomfortable in terms of the decolonial agenda. One of which is, why is it that we should still continue with the current system of education? We like to talk about system before we talk about content, because if you have addressed the system, it will then automatically talk to the kind of content. For example, we are living in a time now that we can acknowledge that our grandmothers, our grandfathers, our great-grandparents, our parents, their system of living, their lifestyle, the traditions we still practice today are watered-down versions of our original cultural rituals, cultural traditions, and that is dying by the year. And notice how, like Mpahlela gives us the word integrationist. Notice how when we come back to our families, we remember that we are Sotho, Zulu, Tsonga, Shangaan, Venda. When we enter our schools, all of that is left at the gate, and we are white kids. Everything is white, from the language, from the content, from the history, from everything that we do, our mannerisms, the uniform. It's got totally nothing to do with when we get out of that gate and we go back home. So this duplicity creates graduates that are integrationists. They only remember themselves to be black when they're in their communities and at home. Yet when they are outside of that environment, they're in the global reality of whiteness, of globalization, where they need to act, speak in a particular way in order to be understood, in order to be, to easily get whatever it is, the message they're trying to get across. So, in a nutshell, what the pandemic has done, what COVID has done, it's done nothing else but expose what has already always been there, post-colonization. COVID has shown you how unequal you are in terms of your environment. COVID has shown you how the health system is not the system that can actually respond the way you expect it to respond for a community that hardly has the economic power to pay for the exorbitant healthcare that they need. Okay, COVID has shown you how the divide you have economically, how the rich can continue to afford and how the poor continue to die because they can't afford. And so, regardless whether you go to a public healthcare system or whether you go to a private healthcare system, COVID has exposed what has always been there, even pre-94. It just basically has just, put it out there that this is how it is. And now you have to go into the conversations of how is it that we have not addressed this inequality and now it's being exposed. I mean, you can see now with the conversation of the injection that they say people must take. I mean, check how they say it must be the elders, and then it must be frontline workers. But let us be honest, the elders are going to die anyway because they're old. The elders are already having other conditions besides what COVID is complicating. So, and again, when you say the frontline workers, we know now that the people who are the most, prone to be attacked, to die, are the people that are working in the health sector, because they're the ones having to deal with patients. They're the ones having to deal with. So already, it's that is not really saying anything new when you say that, okay? And so we should stop being reactionary. We need to start to be proactive when we talk of solutions, when we think about things that we need to do as a way forward. Reactionary only costs us throwing money at the problem, which doesn't solve, which is a temporary solution. Okay, we need solutions that can be maintainable, can be sustainable, and also are not going to be so costly when we actually are to implement them. And that's what we've seen with the vaccine. Okay, and again, this notion of the experts are always outsiders. The experts are the Chinese, the experts are the Europeans. At the expense of our own indigenous knowledge. Where are our sangomas in this conversation? Where are our natural healers in this conversation? We are yet to take seriously what indigenous knowledge that we have. We're yet to take that knowledge seriously in terms of our natural plants, in terms of our seeds, in terms of what we can offer to the conversation. That is yet to be taken at a level that we're talking about. This notion of we're going to give you shots through syringes, because that's all Western. So we will continue to rely on the Western way of thinking precisely because of our colonial educational knowledge. So we need to rethink these things and we need to have these conversations so that we can overcome in terms of our solutions going forward. So, I mean, right from the get-go, if our premise is we want to better the currently existing institutions, then already there we have problems. I am of the view that we need to destroy everything and start afresh on our terms. But if we want to have this conversation of Stellenbosch was racist, it was built with no black people in mind, so we need to have more black people, we need to access more black kids need to come in, then we're doing nothing but performing modernity. It's a performance, it's not a solution. Okay, what we need is a solution. I've just said the whole model of primary, secondary, tertiary, we need to talk to that. What informs that we need to continue with that template? What if I have a child who's brilliant to be sitting at tertiary level at the age of 11? Okay, am I going to have to compel him to go through all these levels before they can sit there? And yet this child was already brilliant at that age. We need to have these conversations. We know that a university like Harvard will take you based on your brilliance. They will take you because their selling mandate is we take cream de la cream. We take guys that wouldn't otherwise in any other place, they wouldn't really be accepted in terms of their prolific intelligence and genius, right? So we need to think at a level of what informs our genius template. I could be talented, born with the talent. No need for anyone to teach me this gift that I have. And all I need is a platform, where I could, if I'm on the right platform, this could be turned into an institutionalized gig, and we can make money. Everybody can eat. I can feed my family. I can be innovative in that industry, and we make do. Now, these are the kind of things, and this is the kind of way we need to disrupt the system. When we say disruption, it's not just negative. It's negative to the positive, meaning if we can do what the Western system is doing, but we do it on our terms, okay? That is the disruption we are talking about. On our terms, based on our realities, and not based on what do they want up there, and therefore we need to respond to that, because that's nothing but colonization. That's colonial rhetoric. It's imperialism at its best. So what we need is not to worry about these institutions, changing these institutions, making them more, places where we can be better, we can we're not going to be intimidated, we're not going to be discriminated against. That's called transformation. And we are beyond transformation. We've already put it on the table that we're now talking about decolonization from 2015. Everything now must be to decolonize. Decolonize the education curriculum. Decolonize the system. Decolonize the rhetoric that we are actually busy with, in the mainstream spaces. Because unless we do that, we will continue to want to be accommodated in their spaces. Which is ironic because they built those institutions in our societies. Why should I have to forget that I'm Zulu, Sotho, Xhosa when I enter a university wall? When I enter a university lecture hall. I should still bring that with me and be comfortable with, okay, I recognize the knowledge you're giving me, but you must also understand that it must not supersede the knowledge that I also bring in terms of my culture, my tradition, my history. So these are the tensions that we need to overcome, and not worry about having black VCs, having, black deans, having the first professors. And these are jokes, man. This is transformation. We have to go beyond this rhetoric of transformation. Sure. Disruption is a word I like to think of in terms of epistemicide in the context of education. If we understand epistemicide as an act, a conscious act of challenging the mainstream narrative of any content, of any subject, then I think we will then, if we had to then apply that to the context of the humanities, or even beyond the humanities, the social sciences, the hard sciences, the natural sciences, then we would understand that you are going to stop using as your premise Einstein is the founder of this formula in science, and go to beyond Einstein or before Einstein. Who amongst our people is the closest that we can say did that, therefore we can make the link as a predecessor? Because we know through books like Professor Ivan van Sertima, Blacks in Science, when he brings out that book and he gives you, to the T, Thomas Edison did not discover the telephone. It was a black man who discovered it, but he was not empowered to patent it. Thomas Edison did. And so we don't talk about this black man, we talk about Thomas Edison. And so we can make so many of these examples, and that is basically what we mean when we say positive disruption. That can you stop giving us what is suitable to you? Give us also what has been inconvenient for you to tell us, because we want the whole picture. We can judge, but I don't think that's the exercise we're interested in. We're interested in having a wholesome education so that we can, when we apply our minds, we come from a premise that's balanced. You know, it needs to be said, if rhetoric that colonization has been pushing has been based on what in America is called they have a term for it. They call it manifest destiny, which basically means the whites are the most supreme in any human race, and the blacks are basically meant to be ruled. And this manifest destiny is basically used with the Bible as the reference, meaning they're getting this from religion. So religion as a business is where they make this source to justify their racist acts as colonizers. If you understand this, that is their basic premise of colonization, of white supremacy, right? Then you will understand that the very project of apartheid and how apartheid would be used, to inform the Bantu policy, which would be the Bantu education system, which is you're going to introduce Africa, impose it upon the people that you say the Bible gives you license to rule over. Because again, it's that argument of the mighty always rule the weak, right? So this rhetoric that they used, it needs to be put in historical context. Racism is a social construct. Racism is as young as the 16th and 15th century. Before this, there was these people of all different colors were peers, they were equals. It's through fields in academia like the Enlightenment philosophy where they would now institutionalize it and justify it, and then when they go into lands like Africa, call themselves discoverers. Imagine, you were here before them, they're telling you they discovered you. When they get to America today, what they call America, Christopher Columbus found black people there, found native Indians there. He comes through and he says he's discovered America. So, because they were now at a level where they were institutionalizing their colonial acts. And so this is what the whites that eventually would be settlers in South Africa, coming from the Netherlands, coming from Holland, coming from Britain, when they get here, it's the same logic. We are mightier. We are the civilized. You are the uncivilized. You are weak because we have the mightier weapons. We've got the ammunition. You guys are primitive. You guys don't have anything that's complex in terms of your structures. Therefore, we defeat you. And because you are our victims, you therefore will be under us. And so the whole notion of language, Ngungi Wathiyongo reminds us, language is your world. Language is how you get to understand the phenomena around you. Because they were colonizing us, they wanted to make their language our world. In this way, we die two deaths. We die the death of being ourselves from our cultures and our traditions, and we get reborn as their slaves, right? And so this is basically the war that we have been engaged with in the name of language. And so it was a contest of English and the Afrikaans. And so there have been added since 1910, when we would later become, in 1961, the Republic of South Africa. Now, because they've been fighting each other, the Brits and the Afrikaners, for who are the rulers of the Republic of South Africa. And when we come to power in 94 as a black government, it is a shame that we didn't do what they have been doing. We didn't graduate our indigenous languages to the level of Afrikaans and to the level of English. We are guilty, we are complicit in this exercise, and the most embarrassing people are black intellectuals, because unlike the ANC, they have relegated their power. Because what is it that they're still teaching today? If we hardly are talking about challenging this power that you have given to English and Afrikaans, and yet you want us to celebrate you as a black professor, as a black doctor, what exactly are we celebrating? If you are nothing else but the modern intermediary of their medium of instruction. So we have relegated much of our duty and our power, and we need to begin to reclaim that. We need to begin. We now know that UNISA is one of the institutions that is trying to open up the space, trying to decolonize. But we can complain it's late in the day, but these things just show you how much we are not putting agency to even the right projects that are being proposed on the table. Okay, so these are some of the things that we need to start. When we have these conversations, we need to also put them in context. Professor Eskia Mpahlela, Ntate Zef Motopeng, Ntate Isaac Matlare. In 1952, which is what I want to get into in my lecture when I talk about the 1976 uprisings, when they would challenge the Excellent Commission, which recommended the introduction of Afrikaans and Bantu policy in education, when they challenged this process, we are failing to make a connect with that moment, to go back to their lyrics, go back to their arguments, and say, can we revisit what these guys were saying then? So that today when we speak, we don't think we're saying anything new. We don't think we're discovering America. We don't think it's a eureka moment. We actually realize that, guys, we've been saying the same thing in different forms. It's a question now of when do we begin to come up with a model that we can say, okay, we all agree to it. Let's put the funding to feed this model, and we begin to implement. That's all that we need to do now. We've been saying these things. It's different people. How many generations since the 50s? We're in the 2020s now. We need to begin to take ourselves seriously.